So we're going. Ryan Tubridy, welcome to Ireland Unfiltered.
Dion, it's nice to see you, and thanks for having me here today.
Very nice to have you here.
Thank you.
How do you feel in that seat?
Peculiar.
Do you?
Yeah. It's peculiar for two reasons. One, the geography of it. I would always be where you are if you're facing the TV looking out at me, so already I'm on the back foot. And two, being interviewed is different, but not as different. Sometimes people who do the interviewing for a living come in and go, oh, this is the weirdest thing in the whole world. It's not the weirdest thing in the whole world by any means, but it's definitely a little odd because you've got all the questions you need or want to ask. I may not have all the answers for you, but I'm good to go.
You've got your book coming out. I'm just interested about this book and the stuff like that you've done. Are they a form of escapism for you?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. When you talk to people all day, every day, for so many weeks in a year and months in a year, you need another outlet. And books has always been my thing since I was a kid. And the opportunity came along 10 years ago to write a book for kind of history book, popular history book, if you want to call it that, which I did. And then I did another one, which was so-so, and then a kid's book, and now this is my fourth book, which is a kid's book. And it happened in July when the people behind the book rang and said, do you want to do this? And I said, well, I'm not sure. And on it went. I won't get into the details of that, but sorry, back to your point. Escapism, yeah. And I was on my holidays, and I have loads of ideas, Dion, in my head for kids' books and kids' stories. I love childhood. I loved being a kid. I like children. I like their craziness. I think some comedians said they're like little drunk people. They don't know what they're saying half the time, and yet they're perceptive, and they sing randomly, and they have lovely observations, And so to write for them and trying to have a bit of crack with them is part of what I do. And yeah, it is escapism. If you're writing about a sheep who obsesses about Christmas and has really bad sheep puns written around them, that's good enough for me to escape from reality.
Well, I got to say, I'm looking forward to reading it to my son.
Sure. How old is your son?
He's 25. He's 4.
He's 4.
He's 4.
I don't know if
we'll see.
Yeah, there's the lovely pictures by Chris Judge in it, but in terms of the gags, he might get one or two of them. Yeah. I've always felt that for films like Wonka for our generation, and then further up to Shrek for another generation, where there's the gags are running for the mum and dad on the seat on the couch as well as the kid. The kid sees bright colours and silly voices, and we're hearing the subtle gag, and we try and do it on the toy show a lot. And this book has a lot of it, whereby she sees Santa Claus and she can't believe it, and her heart skips a bleat, and it's like meeting one of the Beatles. And the idea was that and then there's elves, and they're part of a choir for the Elvish Presley Choir, and I hope the kids will go, who are the Beatles, or what is Sherlock Holmes, and it'll add as a kind of offer a gateway to them to other things to learn.
Yeah, that's very exciting for them.
I hope so.
Yeah. Tell me about, when you say you loved your childhood, do you think you're prone to nostalgia, or do you feel that how you look back on it is how it was? I think all childhood is generally seen through prism of nostalgia, for sure. But in my case, I was very happy with it. It was very joyful in the sense that I had a brother close to my age, and we were like joined at the hip. We collected conkers, we played tip the can, we played 3 and in, we played World Cup. They were my sporting days. They lasted between the ages of 4 and 9, and pretty much not much more than that. We were out the door in the summertime all day, every day, with friends on the road we lived on, and it was charmed, and it was lovely. And then our summers were spent running around the lake in Ballinahown and Connemara every summer for 2 weeks. And I dream about being in Connemara as a kid a lot, strangely, or as an adult, and I don't know what the subconscious reference points are for that. Psychologist watching will tell you, but it brings me to a place that I recall as being very beautiful and very kind and very lovely. And where you felt safe? Yeah,
I think safety is probably part of it. But I remember smells. I remember the chickens and the bread, brown bread, and the jam, and the smell of coffee from my dad's cup in the morning, and his first cigarette, his first Silk Cut Purple of the day in the heat, sitting outside, and remember thinking this day could go on forever. Yeah.
Do you remember thinking it at the time? You remember clearly feeling that at the time?
Yeah, I remember well. I remember being on this little boat the size of nearly the width of that little aluminium boat on the little lake there, and I'd sit up the front, and my dad would be rowing and fishing for a trout, and out would come the cigarettes, and I have the comfort of this almost like nautical womb, and listening to the oars, and the bird song at night, and the water up against the shore, and it sounds very almost romantic, but it's true. It happened, and it was gorgeous, and I can recall those things. And I always say to people now, especially when they have younger kids, don't wish them away, and don't just put them in the hard drive, because you can access them.
And when you go back, do you go back to Connemara now? Does it all that come back to you?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's any trip to Connemara is very emotional, and but not in a grim way.
No.
It's Connemara for some strange reason. We used to go there when we were kids as family and so on, and then I did the program Who Do You Think You Are? And I found out all this information I didn't know. That the fact was that my dad's dad, my grandfather, was from a little village near where we used to holiday with my mum's dad, and all these not coincidences, all these matters of fact happened. But it explains the draw that Connemara has for me. If I'm not there for 2 months, I feel a void that needs to be filled.
And is that more pronounced now since your father passed away?
Yeah, I think it is. And I went to this little village that I'm talking about called Belladangan, and I had this kind of weird moment, which I was reminded about recently by my brother, which was that if I could tell it really, try and keep it quick. But my dad's dad was a GP who arrived down to this village for the first time in the 1920s, and he got to the village and he was very enthusiastic and talkative. Sounds kind of mildly familiar as a gene. But he got to the village, and the older doctor who was retiring the next day said, "You're welcome, Sean." He said, "You start tomorrow." And my granddad said, "Yeah, but I'd like to start today." And the older doctor said, "Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do." He said, there's an island over there, and there's a man on the island, and he's sick. I'm going to go and see him, and that ties up everything, and I'll leave you. You can start tomorrow." And my granddad said, "Can I go out?" And the guy said, "Look, Sean, do your thing. I'm going out to the island. I'll look after this, and you can start tomorrow." So my granddad went off. The man went out to the island, the doctor, to fix the man. He fixed the man, got back on the boat to come across back to the mainland with 2 other guys. The boat went down, everyone drowned.
Wow.
And if my grandfather, obviously, had got on that boat, I don't know who you'd be interviewing today.
Wow.
Yeah, that melted my head.
When did you hear that?
I heard it some time ago, but for whatever reason, it didn't register with me as clearly as it did as a 45-year-old man. And in fact, my older brother loves that story so much. He found the cutting in the newspaper because it's a fact. And I say that because in the modern age, you have to say that. So he got that, and it's in a frame in a house in his house, and it's just one of those whoa. And I told my daughters this story recently, and they kind of said, "Never tell us a story like that because it's too freaky." And it's one of those sliding doors.
Talk to me a bit more then about, like I heard you on the radio the other day talking about, at home you were allowed to watch Grange Hill.
Yes.
And people would come round to your house to watch Grange Hill. Like we grew up around the same time. I remember friends of mine coming round to my house when they were meant to be at mass.
Yes.
Because we didn't go to mass. So we were the house you could go to. It was a safe house.
Yeah, safe house. I like that for kids.
It was Grange. Were you conscious? Like, was it a liberal household?
It was. It really was. It was very easygoing. I mean, part of my love for television came about and media came because the house was very media friendly. I remember one of my first memories as a kid was bringing the Irish Times up to my dad and saying, "Dad, that guy Bobby Sands died."
Right.
And that's etched in my mind. Because we would have been talking about it, and that was 81, wasn't it? And I would have been 8 years old then, but I was clearly aware. And that when I say aware, I was aware that there was a guy who wasn't well who died. I didn't know the politics. I wasn't that precocious. I was close enough. But there was a radio on in every room, the bathroom, in the garden, in the house, and as a kid, I'd wake up early and watch things like TV AM and see David Frost and Anna Ford and Michael Parkinson presenting morning television, and talking about John Major
and Margaret Thatcher and Cecil Parkinson and Edwina Currie and all these names that I was fascinated by the world. And there was politics and there was history and there was, there was art. But it was very much watch what you want. Just don't be a pain in the ass.
And like you were influenced then because, growing up in Dublin at that time, like the BBC and that culture was as much a part of so many lives as
exactly. You'll hear people saying, they grew up in two-channel land. I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a proper dub in Dublin, in the middle of it all with, in terms of, I had access to all the TV channels, all 6 of them, for years. And so that definitely made it less, Irish only orientated, yeah.
And were you aware of it being a different household? Like, obviously, apart from people being there to watch Grange Hill, were you aware of that difference between your house and your friend's house?
Not really. I knew that my house was much more chilled in terms of that, but I didn't. It wasn't an important part of of growing up. I saw that other kids would have had more restrictions based on what they could eat or what they could watch and things like that. We seem to be light touch regulation.
Right. Yeah. And was it? But it was kind of there was some sort of overarching discipline.
Of
it wasn't
course.
like.
Well, I mean, here we are.
Like
I wasn't. No, it wasn't the tenor bounds. Although funny you should say that, because now more often there's a couple of people at work, the Wes Anderson fans, will say when they see my family, myself and my brothers and my sisters together having a pint or whatever, they just go, "You're so tenor bounds," and I go, and there's an element of that. We're a little bit. A little quirkier, I think, than a lot of families, and I think that off air, off late, off radio, it's quirkier again. It's much more a different person, and that gets more, and I'm more comfortable with that as I get older, which allows me to bring it more to what I do for a living because I'm less, not that I'm less aware, but I care less what people think.
Really? And you talked about the political, news being around, but it was a political household in every sense.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. My granddad was, my mum's dad was a guy called Todd Andrews. He was a friend of Eamon de Valera's, and he would have run Bord na Móna and CIE and the like. And his, my mum's brother is David Andrews. Poor David, sorry about that. And he was TD for years in Dún Laoghaire and then a Minister for Foreign Affairs and Marine and Defence. And he would have also been he wouldn't have been a haughty man, which was detrimental to his career for years.
But your other uncle was a haughty man.
Neil Andrews was a haughty man. There's a little fun-sized civil war right there.
And was there?
Not at
all. Can you remember?
No, there wasn't. What I remember is that they always got on, and there was no issue there. They just didn't agree on that. But David, to his credit, then got involved in the cases of the Birmingham 6 and the Guildford 4. And I think that, and then in the Good Friday Peace process. So, we're very proud of his record. And Neil went off to Europe and it worked there before he died, sadly, way too young. And so, yes, politics was in the family. There was lots of talks of canvassing and leaflets and posters and that kind of thing.
And did either of your parents ever run for office?
Yeah, my dad ran for the Senate at one stage unsuccessfully. So he was, was it the Senate? I think it was the Senate, yeah, at one point unsuccessfully. So then he had one go at it and said, I'll leave it at that.
And his father was a TD as well.
And his father was a TD, that's right, in right up to he was in the 1920s, a GP and a TD in Galway. And then he died in 1939 when my dad was 3. So yeah, he was he died young. So that was his story. But yeah, strangely, two political families, and they came together by chance, really.
It wasn't, the politics didn't bring them together?
No, far from it.
And what did your mother do?
My mum is an amazing woman, actually, because I'll tell you a funny, you should never start something by saying, I'll tell you a funny story, because then you're goosed. But I'll tell you a story which she says now, which is pretty astute of her. She's a wily woman, and she said, it's weird, she said, all my life I've been Todd Andrews' daughter, and then David Andrews' sister. She said, and now I'm Ryan Tubridy's mother. Well, why can't it just be me? And I feel, so that's why she's so she was what a homemaker, but she was much more than that. She was and is a woman who has great sense of humour. She would have brought a love of art and beauty, and full of mischief. I mean, that devilment that I love to channel
it would come from her. Where my dad gave me droll sense of humour. Dad was a Dave Allen fan of Monty Python.
Right.
Not Monty Python, but he loved Fawlty Towers, would have been on in the house a lot. And strangely, for a psychiatrist, which he was, he loved Wile E. Coyote. And I will never, like, I'd take a psychiatrist to figure out why, but I remember him sitting on the couch, bent over double laughing and I was thinking, what does it mean that you find this so interesting? What does it mean? But it's great. And he also history. He was great for history and books. So they both brought something to the table that I think I benefited greatly from.
But you say that there. Did you become aware of what he did, and were you curious or fascinated by that at any stage, and what it might mean, like for you, or what psychiatry meant?
No, it's funny you should say that, because a few years ago I was having a bit of a crisis of confidence in my own abilities, and I said, God, I wonder what's going on here. And it was just, I think in everyone's life you dip and you ebb and flow, and I was having one of those. It might have been a summertime or whatever, and I was thinking, well, and I picked up some books about by chat show hosts down through the years, going, what do they think? And it was someone like Dick Cavett, for example, in America, who a very specific type of host. And the other was Anthony Clare, which is, it could bring back to your point, which of course he was a famous psychiatrist, Irish psychiatrist, who used to interview people. And I read some of the interviews he did, and I thought they're really interesting, and it would have tapped into what my dad was doing. And as you say, I started interviewing a little differently and asking questions a little differently. And somebody said, over the course of a few interviews, I started getting letters in from people saying that I was a patient of your father's, and I heard your father in the way you interviewed that person.
And that just started after that?
Yeah. It was shortly after my dad died. I think I was probably having an existential moment as well, and one feeds into the other. And that would have been, and so it wasn't that I endeavoured to emulate, it just seemed to happen that way, and maybe it was a natural consequence by cerebral osmosis. I'm searching for even more complicated words, but I can't find any. But you see where I'm coming from.
And what the crisis of confidence, was it related to your father's death, or was there other aspects?
I'd hate to blame any circumstances necessarily. It was just, I think that just stuff wasn't really going my way, and I just didn't think I was doing a particularly good job on the radio or TV, and I just needed to get my head around that and fix it, and I did.
This strikes me as kind of tough for you, because like you have to go out and appear bulletproof.
Yeah, that's the job.
And yes, you can. Would you ever go on air and say, you know what, I'm actually finding this tough going right now?
I think that you'd have. I can't think of how little sympathy you would get if you went on air and said, I'm not feeling myself today.
Yeah.
So no, I don't expect it or want it, but your job is to be bulletproof. Because you have, because you're in. It's strange. Once the
but it's your job not to be yourself.
Yeah, it is, and but you can't be yourself. If you feel like shit someday, you can't come on the Late Late Show. Tonight I'm going to be interviewing so and so. And by the way, just not feeling that today.
I can't be arsed.
Could you imagine? I go, good day to you. I'm out. There's a pub down the road, and the bar. So no, you just can't. You can still be yourself, but you can't. You can't show the fragilities, because the viewer and the listener has to have faith in your ability to be on. And it's not, and also, it's not about you. It is about the person you're interviewing. So in that way, who cares how you are? Who cares about the bloody host? He's okay. He'll be fine. It's about the guest.
And so that's how you dealt with it, and then off air you just explored this other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Off air, then of course you say to somebody, do you know what? I'm not feeling it. I'm kind of tired, and I just don't know if I'm doing the right thing. And you have the doubts, and you express them, and then you get on with it. Yeah, you can't. There's no time for sitting around feeling sorry for yourself.
And your dad, like, he was a psychiatrist. He worked at. He was based in John of God.
He was.
Wasn't he? But he also went. I remember he came to. He came to schools and talked about.
Yeah, he would have talked about alcohol.
I remember him talking to.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Funny. Yeah, he would have been drafted into schools and the odd time, just to talk about. He always said it. I remember the word. One of the words. There's words associated with your dad. I'm sure you do the same. And one of his was moderation. He used to talk about that word,
Yeah.
moderation. He said, I'm not anti-drink, just moderation. It wasn't bad.
And did he come to talk to you? Were you in school? Did he come to talk to your class?
He didn't address the class when I
No,
was there.
no.
I think he probably discreetly said,
Right.
leave him alone, let's not embarrass him. Yeah.
But I'm just interested as well in growing up in that world where there's politics and everything. And I was listening to a podcast the other day about Bernie Sanders, and it was his campaign manager, and he was saying that Bernie has said he's considering whether he runs again for president, but he said, I'm not one of these guys who has to be president. I've never dreamt of being president. And presumably in politics, he's sitting around with all these people who think I'm going to be president in 2024 or 20, whatever. But in politics, it struck me then that it's a very linear, kind of ambitious kind of world where you say, I'm going to be Taoiseach. Or was that something that kind of maybe you, like when did you start thinking about television, and when did you start sort of outlining ambitions for yourself?
It's funny because that word ambitious is an interesting one to me. I think that in Ireland it's a dirty word. In America it's a very welcome word. And then I've thought, am I ambitious? Well, have I always been ambitious? I don't know. I think I must have been and must be. But I suppose it all started really when I was a kid at the age of 12.
Yeah.
And my dad would take us out to see movies, and we ran out of movies to go to see. And I said, well, what are we going to see? He said, well, complain, write a letter to the paper. So I wrote a letter to the paper. They published it. It's on the 20th of February, 1986. And it was signed Ryan Tubridy, age 12 and 3/4, some Adrian Moley type thing. And it was given out about the only movies around are Rocky 3 and The Goonies and stuff like that. And somebody, a researcher from Anything Goes, which was a kids' TV program at the time, saw the letter, wrote it to me and said, do you want to come in and do some film reviews? Which I did. And then I heard kids on the radio doing a show called Paparama, reviewing books. So I wrote to them and said, can I do that? I just got a taste for it. I thought I could talk, I can read, and I can watch. If I can combine all three as a kid, that's interesting. So it's more curiosity rather than naked ambition. I wasn't a showbiz kid. I wasn't a show hands kid. There was no showbiz in the family, and it just went on from there.
Would anyone ever say, like, describe you as a show off or anything like that? And again, these words are used kind of pejoratively, but I don't mean it as a.
I describe myself to this day as a professional show off. I think you have to be a show off. Was I a show off as a kid? Probably. I was kind of like a mimic, mimic the teachers and, mimic the people off the TV. I used to love mimics for some reason. I used to love Phil Cool and Rory Bremner and Mike Yarwood and stuff. I would love all that stuff. Was I a pain in the arse of a show off? I don't think I was.
Well,
that
I don't think you
bad.
should have to be even like you're a kid. Like it's not that you're a pain in the arse. It's just maybe something that you enjoyed doing.
No, I think it was more hyper.
Right.
I think I was one of those kids. I used to watch the Muppet Show on my head, and I remember being described by somebody, and it stayed with me. And I was only a kid, but these things stay with you as being like a blue bottle. And I remember watching a blue bottle against a window thinking, God, am I that bad? Because they're mad. They just bouncing up and down, banging their heads off the windows. Like it was kind of like an early form of ADD or something. But that was just energy. Like I've always had low buckets of energy.
But I think it's funny what you say about ambition, because Barry Keoghan was our first guest.
Great
and
guy.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he is.
And he was talking about how he made choices. He was very aware of what he wanted to get to. And because of his story and everything, you try and make sense of it through that. But maybe it's just that ambition is a rare thing. It's not that maybe we do look upon it as a dirty word in Ireland, but maybe it's just because it's a rare gift to have, to actually think, I like doing this from an early age. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then there's clearly nothing wrong with it.
No, but that's where I would have been the way you described it there is what I was. I like this. This is nice. I don't want to be the top of the tree. I just like to be in the orchard.
Yeah.
And then once I got in, then you start climbing the trees, and then before you know it, you're doing the late show going, this happened. But I don't just suffer from that imposter syndrome thing that people seem to feel the need to say they suffer from to be polite. Like I'm happy that I'm here.
Right.
And I feel that I earned my wings. So it's not like I'm sitting there going, I can't believe it's me.
Right.
Yeah, I had a bit of that for starters, but that wasn't about imposter syndrome or whatever you want to call it. That was just
pinching myself with my good fortune.
But did you have self-doubt?
I still do. Yeah, of course you do. I think self-doubt is part of the human condition. Anxiety is part of the human condition. The blues are part of the human condition. Happiness, joy, ecstasy, all part of the human condition. I think there's a tendency sometimes to possibly turn them into big psychological or medicinal psychodramas or whatever, whereas the human condition, as I say, allows for all those sort of feelings and emotions. I think some people have them in extremis, and those people need that's serious. That's medical and needs to be minded and so forth. But otherwise, we all have that. It'd be weird if you didn't.
Yeah. But does it become, is that not what imposter syndrome is sometimes, this idea that you're going to be found out, which is sort of self-doubt or whatever?
No, I mean, I have online to find me out. I mean, that's, if I need to worry about, if I need to shake my confidence, I'll just read criticism. So I don't.
But you said about being, then you want to be in the orchard. Like, were there times, like, you went, when you were 15, I think you went to London and you saw an episode of Wogan.
That's right.
And was that a kind of moment again where you're kind of absorbing, but maybe just the osmosis is coming in and you're looking at these things and thinking, I like this? Yeah,
I watched Terry Wogan going out on stage. I was in school and we were on a trip, and there he came out. And I borrowed / robbed the thing that he did, which was about getting back into behind stage on time and all this sort of thing, and a few gags that he cracked. And I just loved it. I loved it. I looked at this guy, going, what a great job. I used to watch like Leslie Crowther bouncing down the steps on The Price is Right and thinking, he's just loving life. I want a job that allows you to love life. Wogan was just having the crack. And I thought, geez, he's loving it too. These guys seem to, and look at Parkinson, then you'd say, look at how interesting those people he's interviewing are, and he's interested. I just think a job that allows you to love the job and life at the same time, what a balance. Like, it's an imbalance the right way. So I was up for that.
And then you went to university.
Yes, I went to UCD and studied history and Greek and Roman civilization.
And were you studying them because you liked the subjects, or were you thinking again of, what kind of career were you thinking of then, if anything?
I firmly believed that the idea of doing an arts degree was really good, because it gave you 3 years to get into college, not have to worry about anything hypersensitively. As you studied, wrote an essay, cobbled together an essay on Aristotle or Oliver Cromwell, and meet loads of interesting people and get stuck in, and then decide. I was quite lazy in that sense. I was kind of wandering into college going, I have no idea. And I'm glad I had that, because I didn't know where I was going to go. I thought about doing law at one stage. I thought, and then I thought, is there a possibility of getting into RTE? It felt like Fort Knox. I didn't think there was any chance of that. And so I didn't go in with any great notions other than get stuck into college life, enjoy yourself, which I did.
And politics was still part of your life then as well, was it?
Yeah, I would have been a little bit politically active is too strong a word, but I was having a look. I was having a look in a few doors, yeah.
But I'm interested in that just because, like reading up on you this week, and the whole family background and how you detach yourself from that a little bit, because I remember my grandfather was in the old IRA.
Yeah.
And after he died, my grandmother, the night before every election, because they were Fianna Fáil, the night before every election, she would ring up my mother and say, don't forget Daddy tomorrow.
All right, do the right thing.
Do the right thing. Yeah. Now, I think my mother usually ignored her, but that was the kind of, but people, I don't think they realise, even though we seem to be breaking up into tribes again in different ways.
Different ways, yeah.
But we don't realise that connection, that pull that there was to the parties.
You're dead right, and I think that, our generation is, I would argue, was the last kick of the Civil War horse, if you like.
Yeah.
Because after that, I mean, our children's generation, or the young ones, the 20-something people who kind of click onto JOE.ie, probably a little bit younger, would laugh at the Civil War politics notion and go, well, how could you? So I think it's nearly gone. I think if there's a grand coalition, that'll kill it entirely. But it's nearly gone. It's present, but I think it's for a different generation.
But was it something you were aware? Did you feel a need to kind of break away from it, or when you say you were exploring it, what did that entail? Well,
that entailed just going to meetings and having a look at it in a college scenario, but not in a sense of anything more serious than that. And then once I got into RTE,
you know what they say, you put your politics at the gate if you had any in the first instance. But you must remember that once I got into my 20s, you were your own man, and there was no. I didn't. My mother wasn't calling me the day before an election to say, "Don't forget your grandfather." So no, we were very much. You're on your own then, and even the family and family members, the vote. We talk about the ballot paper on election day, and it's all over the shop. That the tribal days are gone.
But they even in your family, as you say, like sure there were divides within the
within the hockey subplot. There was.
So it wasn't the same way. And probably when you went to university, you probably thought there were probably better meetings to be going to.
Possibly. Well, I eventually got involved in the History Society. I kind of found my home there.
And then when you got into RTE, like, what you got in the door, and did you think this is where I want to be then?
Yeah, I mean, I think I started off as a runner for Jerry Ryan, making tea and coffee, and I was getting a taste for it there and watching him in action, and I loved what he did and the style he did it in, and I was wowed by it. I'd say awed rather than overawed, but I was going, this is pretty much talking, and I learned my way around the place and did some reports and thought, okay, I could do this, and just on it went.
But was it all? Did you have that idea still? It wasn't. You weren't going to go current affairs. You weren't going to go that way. Like, you did bits of that.
I did, yeah.
But was it the kind of the entertainment, if you like?
Yeah, I had this strange, not strange, but I developed a philosophy very early on in terms of how to approach media in my head, which was called erudite tabloid. An erudite tabloid for me is where I always use the example of, say, David Beckham and Victoria Beckham, when they were starting out at the time. And I said, look, a tabloid's going to go, Becks and posh, this, that, and the other. A broadsheet will say, what are the implications on British society of these two people becoming kingpins of, and what are we going to do? There's got to be a middle ground where you're getting that little whiff of tabloid, but also with an intelligent twist and bringing them together. And that's what I've always endeavoured to do. So it was never going to be prime time. But equally, it probably wasn't going to be whatever the opposite of prime time is. There was a middle line. So we did programs, even the way I did a breakfast program, and it wasn't just Waka Waka breakfast. There was stuff in it that I hope was kind of bright, and that was the Full Irish. And then Morning Glory was another program. And so it's always been that ground I've been trying to take.
And more reflective probably of what people are interested in. Because
I would hope so. Well, that's why prime time is there to do that one type of political interview. We'll do political interviews, but they'll just be a little different.
But I think that's, and even more so these days in some ways, is a lot of and you see a backlash against it, a lot of the political stuff is so concentrated on the minutiae of politics that people aren't interested in.
Well, if you take the recent presidential campaign, I just felt that it was. I didn't really get to know one person. No. I wanted to know who they were, I don't think we did.
I didn't want to know who any of them were.
Well, that's another day's work. Let's face it. But anyway, what happened. But I think it was kind of a strange one.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, but again, there were probably other reasons for that as well. Whether the whole, people if we needed the election at all or anything like that. So.
The historians now can
right
through those coals.
You won't comment on that one.
No.
So talk to me then about, like, again, it's a funny thing. We maybe keep coming back to ambition and whether it's. But when did you start thinking about the Late Late Show?
What happened was I did the Rosa Tralee program for 2 years, and that was my first time in front of a television camera in any meaningful sense. I did a quiz show before that called All Kinds of Everything, and somebody passed by and saw me talking to the audience and said, "Oh, yeah, right, this guy, let's put him." And then the rose happened very quickly. I was going, "Holy smoke!" And I think that I've never looked at it back. I never will, and I suspect it was pretty atrocious. But look, it was a start. And then they said, "Okay, chat show," and a thing called Tubridy Tonight existed for 5 years. And I just loved every second of it. And there was a live band, and it was kind of American style, and it was great fun. And we got these crazy guests from America as well as locally, and it was lovely. And but I have to say, because I was quite young, I mean, I was only 30 thereabouts doing that. The thoughts of to me, the Late Late Show belonged to older people to present. So it wasn't a realistic ambition. I thought maybe 2 presenters later I might have a pop and I'd be in for a chance, but I definitely didn't. So when Pat Kenny left, I did not see myself in the frame at all. I thought maybe they might go as an outside bet. Your man from Saturday has air miles, let's give him a whirl. But I thought they'd never go for it.
And so you didn't expect it?
No, not for a minute. And I can tell you that straight in the eye.
Really?
Not for a second, yeah. I think that there were other runners and riders, which I won't get into now because it's not fair, but it's other than to say that I just thought somebody else, and there's two or three people in my head I thought would have been pretty well set up to get the gig.
But did you say you were interested? Did you let people know you were interested?
What happened was there were calls made, and and a few people were invited in for a chat, like this. But not sinister.
I've got nothing to offer you at the end.
No, but no, it was called in for a chat and to shoot the breeze, and the breeze was shot.
Yeah. And did you have any hesitation? Because as you said,
No.
you're doing a show.
No, I didn't. No, I'm not going to cut across you and say no.
Okay.
I'm not going to vacillate and say, I have to think about this for a minute or two. Bang.
Right.
They said, you got the gig. And I went, wow, I can't believe it. I was brought into a room. I was in, what do you call that when they lock down? And I had my phone and the room, and I called my folks and I said, lads, you're not going to believe this. I called them obviously separately. I said, you're talking to the next presenter of the Late Late Show. And, it was a magical moment. I think if nothing else, I was so happy that they were able to take that call and take it. And they smiled and laughed and said, great, but they weren't showbiz people.
Yeah.
So they had they didn't want to necessarily come into the show. The way people can have tickets, can have tickets. They were going, great, good luck with that. If I told them, look, I've just been made chief engineer on the project to build the bridge, they would have been equally as happy. But it was a big day for me. I was very happy.
And the imposter syndrome, never, like when you look back on your first shows and stuff like that.
I was nervous wreck.
Yeah.
I still get nervous on a Friday night, Dion. Like, this doesn't disappear. It's part of the fuel.
Yeah.
But for those first few shows, absolutely terrifying, in a really good way. But I describe it like cold water in the sea. And you look at the sea, and maybe you're doing a swim on Christmas morning. You look at the sea, and go, I can't get in there. And then you get in, and you go, this, like the first 30 seconds, minute or two, you find it hard to breathe, and then you just go, no, I don't want to get out.
Yeah.
It's like that every Friday.
But was there a sense of responsibility? Because to me, like the Late Late Show is, again, it's like an office of the state almost.
Weirdly, it is, yeah.
And like even talking to people in the office today, like, you have to deal with things like, there are people today who are saying, I'll ask them for toy show tickets. Like there's the kind of the patronage of the state as well. Like it's a similar. It's actually
it is. It's funny you should say that, because when we go around the country with our radio show, and we roll into town on the Wild Atlantic Way, for example, whatever, and people come out and you're shaking hands and you're kissing babies and you're posing for photographs. And you know something, I love it. I think that there's a political gene in me that, because they'll say to each other, don't let your man out. There's loads of heads outside and he'll take another hour. And I'll say, let me out there, because I love it. I mean, I love that. It's like running for office when you go around the country with the radio show. And equally then, the Late Late Show. Where was I yesterday? And people, we were filming something, and neighbours in this estate, and they all came out and they were shaking hands. And I don't know, I just love it. I just love the warmth. When we went to London recently, I walked out of the hall at one point, and the warmth, it felt like walking out of the arrivals hall in Dublin Airport on Christmas Eve. They were just going, wow, it's great to see. And, I love it, because you'll get, negativity, of course, and I understand that, because I'm not always going to be great, and I'm also going to be a pain in the arse for a lot of people. A lot of people watching this will be going, oh, your man drives me nuts. I get that. You're never going to be everyone's favourite person. But if you can be a favourite person for a few people, for this needy narcissist, that's enough. That'll get you by. And
the negativity, you said earlier, your mother always said it was like watching you get into a boxing ring.
Yeah.
But that was to do with the criticism around it.
That's right. When I started doing the Late Late Show, she said, oh, God. And I said, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And she'd say, oh, it's like watching, I feel like a mother watching a son get into a boxing ring. And I said, what? And she'd pick up a paper and she'd see something mean. And thankfully, she doesn't go online, thank God, because if she thought the papers were bad, Jesus. That's a walk in the park.
and she'll. But things are good now, and in terms of things like coverage, people are. It's fair, and if it's negative, it tends to be reasonable, and it's not just out to get them for get them.
Do you think it was like that?
I thought initially, people had trouble adjusting. I'm just not going to be everyone's cup of tea. That's just the way it is.
Do you think being, what were you, 35? Do you think being that age when you got it added to that? Because people, again, they see ambition when they see...
Yeah, they see cocky,
yeah,
smug, irritating, all the words that I think I can attribute to myself looking back. A little bit now the odd time. But yeah, I can see why. I would have, that was 10 years ago. And then comes age, and then comes life experience, and then comes, realizing the good things in life and the toxic things in life, and what you need to be beside and who you need to be near, and it's a certain amount of wisdom, loads of experience, and life is pretty exciting, and you meet some extraordinary people, and you realize you are a lucky man.
You touched on it a couple of times there about online and the abuse there, and I've heard you talk about it again. You were talking about someone last week, and you said they should realise, I think you said something, online is sort of for abuse.
I think that it's like that. It was that brilliant scene in the Saturday Night Live sketch recently at the Kavanagh hearings, and the woman who was brought in to ask a few questions because all the grey men that were asking the questions wasn't accepted. Remember that woman with the glasses?
Yeah.
And Saturday Night Live showed her sitting down. She goes, "Hi, I'm sitting at this ridiculous table, and I'm here mostly for Twitter." They got it. It's like that sums it up. So what I say about it online, the great thing about online is you can go offline, and that's what I've done. I don't read comments.
And you never, you left Twitter.
Left Twitter for a number of reasons. I mean, there's a to use that awful word, there's a narrative that says that I left Twitter because I was bullied off it, or that's nonsense. I'd love to nail that line now. I left it because there was part of it was the irritating thing of people constantly at you, which is fine. As many compliments as negatives, but actually, I was spending too much time on the bloody phone. And my daughter turned around to me one day and said, "Are you on that again?" And I went, "That's it. I'm not going to be one of those dads who I see pushing prams like that." And I wasn't pram at that stage, but I just don't want to be one of those guys who's glued. I'm on my phone. I'm still on Instagram. I like it because it's friendly, and I don't engage really. I just send out the stuff and I see people react, and it's lovely. It just gives me a little insight to another audience that I don't have on TV and radio. But I'm not going to get into the rabbit hole of Twitter and Facebook and all that. I have none of that. So or even WhatsApp, Dion.
Really?
Because WhatsApp is insane. Yeah. Because you get bundled into groups like you're put in the back of a van. Right. And told, this is the meet Dion for JOE.ie group. Yeah. And suddenly there's 5 people there. And then people take the huff when you don't respond in 3.5 seconds. Then the tyranny of the ticks. And there's the blue tick and the double tick and the single tick. It's exhausting. So I now text.
So you must have left WhatsApp. You know a lot about it.
I was on it.
You know a lot about the art.
Can you not see how exercised I am by WhatsApp? I'm clearly traumatized. Like, what happened? That happened. I hated it. It was just too much. And I've got a very small group of friends, and I said, "Lads, I know this is annoying because it is. We're trying to organise a pint or whatever, and they have to text me, and there's 5, and it kind of feels arrogant." I said, "But look, I just don't like it. I love reading. I love watching a movie or something. And if WhatsApp is there, you're on it, and you're not reading, and you're not watching." So I just whittled it all down to a few different apps that, like trying to find Here Today, was useful to have sat nav. So I'm not going to knock you it up. I'll stick with the smartphone, but limited.
And so you'd never go back on Twitter?
No. Never going to happen.
And do you check it? Do you like? Is it,
no, I don't. No, and I'm not going to be, bullshitting you about half checking and half casting an eye. No, 100% no.
So do you find that you're missing out because a lot of stuff happens there?
No, I don't want to be there. Okay. A lot of stuff happens everywhere. Yeah. I'd much rather. Like I find it's hilarious. Like I don't have Facebook, and I find it like. I'm glad people are so in touch with people they haven't seen in school for 50 years and that they know they had a child recently. And I'm being cynical and facetious, but I just don't need that noise. I just have a few friends, family, colleagues who I get on really well with and whose company I enjoy. That's all I need. I mean, I don't want to be told you're great all the time. I don't want a yes man. I've got that bit sorted out. I know where I can get the truth from too. So that's enough.
And when you got rid of that stuff, did it help you as a broadcaster?
Yes. Focus on what's important. Focus on the brief. Focus on the guest. Focus on the team talking to you.
Yeah, it did. Absolutely. Decluttered.
Decluttered.
Yeah,
it.
hugely, yeah.
And
It was really good. It was liberating.
Because you talked about it there, and you've said it before about how you feel you're becoming more yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, how much of a struggle was that to kind of, again, because maybe of the burden of this office of the state?
The office of the state. You make it sound so grand.
Well,
but there is
grand.
something weird about it.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I mean,
People are more interested in who presents the Late Late Show than who's like the Minister for Finance.
well, for now anyway. Yeah, sorry, what's the question? I missed the question, excuse me, sorry.
The question was...
I was laughing at the office of the state, but yeah, no.
The question was, like, was it, that process of becoming more yourself when you do this? Because I will say, for example, when I listen to you on the radio, I hear a greater range of your personality.
Much more so. You're so right.
Than on television.
Can't do it on TV.
Why?
Because if for some reason it is, it's funny because on the TV, I'll meet people off TV, whether it's having a pint or, going down the pier for a walk or whatever, and I'll stop and chat with them for ages if they want. Like, I'm not, anyway, I'll chat and they'll go, God, and I know what they're thinking. They're going, God, you are some knob on the TV. But you're all right. and I do understand that because I've done that. I've met actors and actresses and, I have to say actors now, I just said, sorry. I've met people, public figures and otherwise, who I've probably been quite judgy about at home on the couch. Then you meet them and you feel, oh God, sorry about that. I always thought you were a bit of something else. So the TV, it's just restricted because it's camera and it's the size of the audience and it's a different medium. Whereas your observation is spot on in terms of the radio's just, it's like, I tell you, I really mean this. It feels like going down to my kitchen table with tea and toast and with the papers and saying what's going on. But with 330,000 people.
And does the television then feel like something you can do forever because of that? Like, because it's a different...
No, I'd like to warm it up if I can.
Right.
Yeah, I'd love to take it somewhere a bit more me, but I don't know if the viewers want that, and I don't know if television is wide enough to accept a little bit more freeform.
What would you like to do? Like, if you could do that, what would it look like? It
would be... I suppose I would probably do a longer form interview, maybe like this, a bit more time, and I'd probably possibly consider trimming the show itself if possible, but that's not necessarily likely going to happen today or tomorrow. And I suppose I would just do things that would allow me to be a bit more like the radio guy. He's just a bit more chilled out, and I hate using third person, but you know what I'm talking about. Because but I shouldn't shy away from the fact that when you're on TV and radio, you're not yourself. You're a caricature of yourself. So it's like having two drinks, really. And it's not really you. So then you see me going for a walk, and I could be very quiet because I'm kind of tired and I've done I've done my thing. So there's different variations of the self, but I think that's the same for anyone doing an office job or. You have to be yourself in the office and then you go home. It's funny that it's almost like you will hear some people, and like someone like David Letterman was always said, I think Larry Sanders kind of parried him like this, that the minute the camera went off, he would just stop talking to people. I know, not like whereas
you say you bump into somebody walking down the pier, you'll talk to people and whatever, and they'll say, well, you're different to your own television, but you're almost you're more outgoing and expansive and expressive. Well, I don't know. I always like people, weirdly, and it's useful in this business. I really mean that. But as soon as I leave my house, you're on, and that's cameras and phones and eyes. You are a walking institution of the state, to borrow your phrase. But people, you go into a coffee shop and. It's quite funny, and it's been years doing it now, so it's flattering, I'm sure, but it's still a little bit peculiar. But and people will come up and say, "Sorry for bothering you. Can I have a photograph?" Absolutely. Can I have toy show tickets? Never going to happen. Yeah. Can I have tickets for a regular show? I'll look into it for you. And it's will you take this CD? And of course I will. You're on. You are on. So again, it's like a register of members' interests. You have to, you can give them toy show, you can give them late show tickets maybe, but not toy show. Correct. Tickets. You have to always be careful and accountable. Your father, was he ill before he died? He was ill, yeah. He had a bad heart. And he was quite ill about 10 years before he died.
and then he was on a go slow really for 10 years, and then he died. We had about a 4-week. We were on notice. Yeah, so that was difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what like on that notice period, was it a sudden within that 4 weeks? Were you
No,
told?
we saw that it was a slow walk to the other side, so we were able to walk with him in that sense, and we kind of had a strange thing where we kind of almost mourned him in advance because we knew it was coming. But that didn't make it any less difficult. You know, when people say, "Oh, he was sick," or I don't mean about my dad. I just mean when people say he was. I always feel very conscious when people say, "Yeah, my father died," and I say, "All right, how old is your dad?" And they'll say 90. I never say that thing that people say was he had a good innings, because I think that when your dad's your dad, and there's never enough innings in the world for your dad to be around.
Because the loss is the thing.
The loss is the thing, and you know, to have to delete the number from your phone or sell the car, or not to have that call between going from one building to another that you'd normally make, and he was unlike many other fathers. He always gave me a hug or a kiss on the cheek, and you know, he was a good man.
Was he? He was open with his love for you.
He was, but he wasn't like a new man. Far from it. He was born in 1936. I always think about that he was alive when World War II was raging, and but he was a good man, and as I say, he gave me a lovely love of history and books and comedy and Connemara. Yeah, I'm very grateful.
And how often would you talk to him?
And now?
No, how often then would you talk to him? Like when you say you would call him when you were walking between?
Yeah, I would talk to him at least once a week.
Would you?
Yeah. I always found on a Friday, walking from the radio show to the TV show, I always had this lovely 10 minutes. And that would be the call to say, right, how's your world? And my world's good. And what's happening? And we'd talk. And that was fine. And then he died. And he wasn't into the Late Late Show thing. He wasn't into that, you know, the vulgarity of showbiz. You know, but he wasn't disapproving by any means. He wasn't a snob. You know, he was a good guy. And it was only after he died that I discovered that I was given a lovely envelope, and in the envelope were Father's Day cards that I'd sent him, letters from Irish College that I'd sent him. And very quietly and very discreetly, and in his own, he was a Galway man, in his own sort of gentlemanly way, he would put away a few of them as mementos. And it was a very beautiful thing, and I have them to this day. And that meant the world to me. That's all I needed. It was just very gorgeous.
And when did you get them?
I got them a few years ago. I mean, not long after he died. But I was flabbergasted, to be honest with you.
Were you?
Yeah, I just presumed that the letters come and they go, like a text does now, or an email. But I was quite taken by the fact that he was keeping a watching brief.
Yeah.
There were a couple of even these mad Father's Day cards. We used to have these in-jokes together, you know. His name was Patrick, and I used to call him, you know, Cow Pat, and silly things like that, like little punny jokes. And sure enough, they were all there, and I was going, wow. Now, it wasn't a treasure trove.
Yeah.
It was like he almost curated, to use the modern word, or the reuse of the word, curated the memories. And he said, I'll keep that one, and that letter as signposts of me growing up. So that was lovely. And
do you look at them occasionally?
I do, yeah, I do, yeah. But I'm not maudlin about my dad. I feel I've dreamt about him many times, which is really nice, actually. And that's where I'd meet in a dream, and I'd say, Jesus, how are you? I don't know if you ever had this with your dad. If your dad appeared in a dream to say hello. Yeah. And do you take comfort from it?
I do, although I feel a bit of sadness.
Yeah.
Because when I wake, because you kind of feel this is real now.
The loss is gone again. Yeah, and that's true. But I'm shocked because I'm not an airy-fairy person. I'm quite practical. You know, that's that and that's this. But when he shows up in the odd dream, I'm going, it's like going for a pint with him. It's really weird. But you're right, you wake up going sad, but then you think, God, it's nearly like, God, if you were a real spiritual person, you'd think maybe there's a message coming to say, just checking in on you. But then I don't believe that for a minute. But it's nice while it lasts. It's like looking at a photo in an album. Yeah.
And when do you miss him?
That's an interesting question. When do I miss him? Funny enough, that little walk across between one building and another had become an unofficial phone call. And you know, even years later, you're still going, oh no, that's not there now, that call. That call will never be made again. And I described it. A friend of mine's father died recently, and they were so close. And I said, "It's you join a club you never want to be a member of, but time is kind, and you definitely." I remember asking Bob Geldof. I mean, you think if your dad dies, and my dad was in the 70s, and you think, God, the tragedy of that. And then you talk to Bob Geldof and think of the multiple tragedies he's had. And I remember asking him about how do you do it, and he said, "You don't." This business of time is a healer and other cliches. I don't believe that's necessarily true, but he said you don't learn to get over it, but you do learn to accommodate it.
Yeah.
And that always stayed with me. You accommodate it, and that's what I do.
And that's it. Loss is with you rather than it being, as you say, it's not maudlin. It's not
really
weeping.
No, it's not a weeping willow conversation.
No.
In fact, it's nostalgic and it's warm. I've lovely memories.
As a kind of consumer of media and as also a practitioner, what do you think of the state of the media at the moment in Ireland, and what's happening kind of worldwide, and how it ties in with politics and stuff like that?
I feel that there are some really interesting things happening that suggest to me we're in a media transition. We don't quite know where it's going to go. Terrestrial television is slightly under threat, I suppose, with the streaming services that are available. I count on the fact that big event TV like the Late Late Show are surviving and sometimes thriving because people have somewhere to go online with Twitter or whatever it might be on a Friday night. So for all my giving out about Twitter, I welcome it because they're watching.
Just not for you.
Just not for me, but they're watching. But look at JOE.ie and other sites that have come up that are giving the papers, quote unquote, a run for their money, if not more. I think that's really interesting, but we still don't know the full impact of it yet. My concern is echo chamber, and in the States particularly, where it just seems to be you're either one camp or the other. So where do you go? And that's why I think RTE is really important now more than ever, and places like the BBC. And they sound like now kind of venerated old school institutions, but we need them because they're providing journalism offered by people who have studied journalism and people who are schooled in what they're doing. I think that what I worry about is that a lot of places have poorly qualified or unqualified people running around digging up news from mainstream media sites and repackaging them as their own and stuff like that. That would worry me a little bit. And that perhaps maybe now that there's so many news outlets and so many places to go, that people might turn around and say, I just want one I can rely on. And and that could be actually a good thing for mainstream.
But are people doing that? Because human nature is sort of going the opposite way, where people are selecting things based on their interests. So they're not getting a newspaper anymore and reading one newspaper. They're reading 15 articles about something that interests them. Yeah,
and look, that's fine. But then let's say you have a Facebook feed that's giving you your information. Would you believe anything you read on Facebook now? I mean, when you think of what happened with the American elections and what's happened with the Russians and the Chinese and so on, I'm very careful about what I go to read for news now, because I just don't know who's telling the truth anymore.
Do you think the concept of balance is kind of outdated in some ways, though, because of the way the world has gone with Trump and with fake news?
Well, you could argue balance is needed now more than ever, because otherwise you're just getting this clunk seesaw thing. Whereas, I know that if we're doing a debate on a referendum, whether it's they repeal the 8th or whatever it might be, gosh, you're balanced to within an inch of your life on the clock. So in that way, at least, again, if you're a consumer of media, you can watch a debate like that on the Late Late Show and say, well, at least I know it's going to be fair and everyone's going to get a fair crack of the whip. I think that's healthy.
But you will also get people then saying, well, you've got somebody on, the one that people say now is like, if somebody says it's raining and somebody says the sun is shining, you look out the window and see what the weather is. You don't get two people in to argue it, and there's that problem with balance too, that you will have people saying things like Trump does that are lies, and he's there making these lies, and he's seen as one side of an argument. So does there need to be a more active kind of intervention by media in what people are saying?
I think they're doing their best. I watch a program on CNN on a Sunday evening called Reliable Sources. I'm sure you know it, and the guy presenting it, he's going to have a heart attack someday. The vein in the side of his neck is pumping as he's going, we told you about this. We've been telling you. It's like Cassandra telling us things that come true after everyone's told them that it's not true, and they can't be believed. So they're trying to, but Trump has a big megaphone in his hand, and it's very hard to get through that wall of sound.
But this is the thing, it may be about who we amplify. Like if you look at his rise, it was because he got so much news time and air time because he was more interesting than the other guys. Yeah. But there was a choice to make almost.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, even in some of the, like, are there guests that you've had? I'm thinking kind of someone like Katie Hopkins. Do you regret having her on?
No, I don't regret having Katie Hopkins on. I think that if I did that, it would be a disservice to everyone to say, that wasn't the right thing to do. I don't know if somebody like Katie Hopkins will be appearing on the show anytime soon. Can I say that much?
You can say that much.
Okay.
But do you see why people get upset about it?
Yeah, hugely so. Yeah. Hugely so. But and there is a penchant, if you like, for loud extremism at the moment, and I think a lot of it is coming from people who couldn't get heard in their childhood nearly. I think there's some sort of weird psychobabble subplot to this story.
The thing that struck me watching that show was that she was on after Trump was elected, wasn't that right? And she added nothing. I was going to say she added nothing to the view. I would have been interested in hearing somebody, even from the Trump side, give a Trump analysis.
Right. Yeah.
And she did. She came on. I don't know if you were talking, but she came on and just shouted at people, shouted at the audience, and offered. There was no information at the end of it.
Yeah, that's not great for us. We prefer something a little more informative, but she is a panto villain.
Yeah,
and that's what we saw.
Yeah, the London show, like you talked about the big, set piece shows you've had, like that was like a huge undertaking. Was it disappointing then that you had to deal with the ticket stuff and stuff like that afterwards?
No, I don't think so, because the ticket stuff was strangely, it was a problem that was outsourced, which was difficult for the company that it was outsourced to. We had to take a lot of the flak for it, understandably, for the people that didn't get in. The company in question said that they had never seen the like of it for demand. Yeah. So there's a kind of a strange compliment for us in that, because of the fact that there was the demand. The only thing that bothered me about the whole event was that people that were queuing were upset. I'm not that concerned. I think then people will jump on that and pretend that they're outraged, and they'll use the people's outrage to fuel maybe headlines and so forth, and thereby detracting from the fact that this was a very successful show. Did 53% share. It did an average of 610,000 viewers, touching on 1.2 million on the night. This was a great result for us, and for the people that were in the hall that made it in. This was a great story for I think the Irish in the UK, who we celebrated, and the welcome we got was extraordinary. I'm still getting letters on my desk in my office from people around the country, and this is true, to say they enjoyed the show immensely. But you wouldn't think that if you were to read some headlines, because people like to jump on somebody else's unhappiness, or happiness, I should say.
The other thing I'm interested in on the back of that show is just your own view. Like you talked about Brexit on the show. You've talked about your own changing kind of maybe relationship with Britain, maybe, or how you felt like the Queen visiting was a game changer. But coming maybe from your background as well, you would have had a nationalistic point of view. Are you concerned about Brexit, and not just what it's going to do in that sense, but the resurrecting kind of nationalisms like across the two islands?
I tell you what, I'm nearly more concerned about the fact that Stormont isn't sitting.
Yeah.
I think that's nearly the biggest concern, because if they're not sitting, who's fighting for, the people in Northern Ireland on the ground? It's very hard to do that. So that how that thing hasn't been sorted out, I'll never know. I mean, the fact of the matter is that you take somebody like take that troika of politicians who people have questions about, but of Bertie and Blair and Bill, the three Bs, and they just cared about that situation, and they put knocked heads together, and then Clinton sends over George Mitchell, and America's eyes off the ball. I think they normally kind of knocking around the periphery and might send someone over to almost like an adult in the room.
Yeah. It wouldn't be that at the moment.
That's not going to happen now. No, you know. I mean, it's too obvious to even get into why it won't be. But that's a crying shame that Stormont isn't running. People like Martin McGuinness, Ian Paisley Senior, who, uncomfortable bedfellows, got it together, realised this is our moment, strike. They're dead now. I think you miss those colossus, that type of colossal politician who was able to rise above, shake a hand, get on with it. It's gone. We're into niche, politics now. And you have the DUP with their 10 seats wagging the Conservative tail. It is a cluster cuss, as fantastic Mr. Fox will rightly say, and it's one that God knows where it will end up. But it's deeply concerning. Now, in terms of hard borders and a return, then does it trickle down right back down to the hard men and women? I don't think it will do that. But I have dark moments of the soul where I do worry about it.
But and even just in the relation, I think that was the as you say, the show was a great success and it tapped into that. And I lived in London for nearly 20 years. So
you know what it's like to be the Irish over there.
Yeah, but I always felt it's because of that culture we grew up in. It was the easiest thing in the world to move to London.
Yeah.
Because you knew so much about it. Like the other way, unfortunately, isn't the same.
Yes,
they know nothing, but we have their programs, we have everything.
Yeah.
But anything that makes that, I lived there during the entire time of the ceasefire, so it was fine. But anything that ruptures that is not, maybe it's not going to lead to violence, but it's sad.
Yeah. Because
there is a relationship now between the two countries.
Yes.
That is a good one.
Yeah, it's a very strong relationship and one that, that's what we're touching on the show in London. That was the point, was that remember how sulphurous it was and how horrible obviously not for me because I wasn't there, but you know the stories and people going over and that's where we talked about Terry Wogan's voice being that same voice of an Irishman as bombs were going off around the place. And now we are going over and there's all these success stories and people are just, it's trouble free. But this is an uncomfortable rumble.
Where to next for you? You think, where will you be in 10 years?
It's funny you should ask that question because seeing as you've asked me a lot about my dad today, we used to go sit around a table in his living room, myself and a few pals and having a few beers, and after enough glasses of whatever he was having, he'd turn around and say, right lads, 10 years time, go. So it's funny you should ask me that because I used to hate that question and I never rememed the answer to it, by the way.
Really? You hated it?
I did, yeah. I hated the question. I was never a man for what-ifery.
Right.
I feel, I'm quite stoical about taking it on the chin and this is what it is, what's next? So I don't know. But in answer to your question, where will I be in 10 years' time? Will I be presenting the Late Late Show? I don't know. That's a non-answer, but it's all I've got for you at the moment. Because I think that it's in the gift of others who presents the Late Late Show and not me. So that's one. Two, do I have other ideas? Yes, I do. I have loads. I have loads of history in my head in terms of history programs and series and documentaries and things like that I'd love to explore. I have a heap of kids' characters who are jumping around like skittles in my head that I'd love to get out on the page. And there's a radio podcast that I'm very keen to develop that's going on in my head too. So I have loads of places to go, as Dr. Seuss would kind of allude to at some stage. So if I get a tap on the shoulder tomorrow to say Late Late Shows, thank you for your service and good night, I won't be bored.
Would you go abroad?
I'd be a fool to say no, but I'm a homebird. I love this country. I love the sea. I love my couple of pints. I love my few friends and family. And I find that if I go away for more than a few days, my dad used to say, look at Ryan, he'd get homesick in Greystones. And, there's truth in it. I just love it here. So I wouldn't be in a hurry to go away, but I don't want to say to you, never, because that would be a mistake in case something curious happened.
And as your kids get older, does it become easier to think about doing that?
Yes, it does. Yeah, that's a very good observation because it's true. The girls are nearly 20, nearly 14, and they are just so extraordinary, and I think that they would be up for any suggestion of that sort in due course. So yeah, It's definitely makes it easier. There was no way I could have gone away when they were younger. Not a chance.
And what do you think of the Ireland that they're going to be growing up in?
I think there's really, really positive things happening for that generation. Particularly my eldest daughter, she's so smart. Her friends are so funny, clever, articulate, engaged, and they're loving life. That's what I keep saying to her. I have to go out tonight again. I said, go out all night. Like, go for it. You know that sign, don't grow up, it's a trap. And I think that there's truth in that. I think some people grow up even into their 30s, they all get very serious. And I think that you get to a certain point where you just embrace the fun, embrace the lunacy and the ludicrous things in life, because it's daft. Our existence is quite daft. And, there are people who are just brilliant, and there are people who are, just a bit earnest. And I veer towards the ones who just are up for a bit of devilment.
That's great, Ryan.
Thanks
very
Dion.
much.
It's nice. I enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you
for your time.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.